I am extremely happy and proud to introduce one, in my opinion, of the most interesting and powerful films of this year's festival, On the Divide. And we have our two wonderful creators, I should say, with us. Leah Galant. Hi. Is it gallant or galant? Because the Polish accents tend to go some
Yeah.
other way.
I'm actually half Polish, so is my Polish roots.
You're gallant.
But galant, yeah, it's galant. Any way you want to say
If
it.
you're
But
half
yeah,
Polish, you're gallant. Just deal with it, okay?
Yes.
And then I think it's slightly either to pronounce this one. We have Maya Cueva. Yeah. Hello.
Yeah.
So you've made this extremely powerful film that one could say is a film about abortion, but I don't think it's fair to reduce it to that. It's a story about people, about relationships, about social barriers, about hopelessness and hopefulness, and I mean so many other things. So I would like to start by asking you, how did you decide to make a movie in this sort of far end of America, a place that I think many people might not be even aware is still American?
Yeah. So I can start. Leah and I actually met when we were in undergrad in college.
You did a movie together already.
Yeah.
We know that, yeah.
Didn't do a movie together there. It was a short documentary following a traveling abortion doctor who travels from New Mexico to Texas. And that's, we're not from Texas, so we didn't know how dire access was there until we actually went there and saw that clinics were closing and abortion access was really restricted. And it was actually during The Provider, which is the short we made, that we made our way to the border and saw that there was only one clinic there.
Mm-hmm.
So once we were done with school, we really felt like, this could be its own film, right? And then just the first time that we got down there, we got connected with Ray, who's the security guard in the film. And then about a year later with Mercedes and Denise. So we, this film could have been a number of different films. There was a big Supreme Court case that was happening at the time in 2016, Holm and Self versus Hellerstedt. So we at first thought we would be following the Supreme Court case, but once we really met Ray and Mercedes and Denise and really started following their stories, we felt like, this is who we want to follow. This is who we want people to see, because we felt like their stories had never been on screen before.
Mm-hmm. Leah, what about you? Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, Maya summarized it pretty perfectly. I wouldn't really add much. Just, I think what our intention was to create something, as Maya said, that we hadn't seen before in terms of looking at reproductive access and abortion. And a lot of times Latinx perspectives and border stories are not centered. So I think that was important for us to create this film in the setting in McAllen, in a community that we really love, and incredible organizers and people that live there. So that was definitely something we were thinking about when we decided where to film.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to assume that at this point you guys are experts when it comes to abortion law and abortion rights in America. And I mean, this is a huge country where the law varies from state to state. It's, I think, a slightly foreign concept to someone who, like me, is Polish, and basically it's the same everywhere. So can you just give our viewers a little introduction on how much difference, or rather, what is the situation? What's the most restrictive law that we have at the moment? Because I think when people think about states, they think, Planned Parenthood, you can just go and get it, not a problem. And I mean, I think state by state, the situation is changing right now.
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify, I wouldn't say we're experts on abortion legislation and law by any means, only for reasons that it is very complicated. And there's a statistic that over 90 pieces of anti-abortion legislation were introduced to the Texas legislate in 2021 alone so far, in July at the time. So it's been much more. So
1 month, you said?
Since from like January to July, from
Okay.
the time frame.
Wow.
And it's definitely higher now. So that just shows you how many laws that are constantly kind of coming through, and how many situations change all the time. Like we're trying to keep up with the law in Texas that prevents people from getting abortions after 6 weeks, and which is when in Texas, and it's called SB8, and that's when most people find out that they're pregnant, is between 6 and 8 weeks. So it's essentially an abortion ban. So we're following that, and even that, though, it changes every day. Like I think we just got a alert that something was decided. But that being said, there's definitely a range, and like that, depending on the state that you're in. I definitely encourage people that are interested to look up, like abortion laws by state, and there's like really robust maps that show like what's open, what's the closest clinic if Roe v. Wade, which is the Supreme Court decision that codified abortion into law, if it was overturned, which states would then have trigger laws that would automatically ban abortion. And so there's unfortunately a lot of like scenarios now that could happen. But as of today, I mean, abortion is still legal in all 50 states. And it's still, it's just not accessible in every state. And usually states that have Republican governments or right-wing leaning governments, and people that run those states are usually the ones that have more restrictive laws. It's harder to get abortion. And then where Maya and I are from, California and New York, it's pretty, if, especially if you have Medicare, Medi-Cal, or state, I'm trying to translate it for people in Poland. It's for insurance, for health insurance, it can be easier to get in states that are, more like quote unquote blue or Democratic leaning. But of course, just because we live in those states does not mean that like this doesn't affect us. And I think people should understand that it's very interconnected. And of course, the situation here is very similar to the situation in Poland. So I think we need to be more globally connected in that way, and understanding that it is hard in specific states, but it's also going to be hard for a lot of people. Specifically will impact women of color the most, and people of color the most. So just understanding that when it comes to like differences in the laws. But I don't know, Maya, if you wanted to add anything.
So Maya, before you just continue, I just want to point out one thing, because Leah, you said something that is very close to my heart when I watched how the discourse and the discussion progresses in Poland. So abortion here is technically still legal, but it's not accessible. There is this culture of fear. We've just had a young woman die of sepsis because she had a non-viable fetus, and they were waiting for it to die because they didn't want to abort, even though technically they could, because her life was in danger, as the development of the situation, the tragic development of the situation proved. But the pressure, the political pressure, the threat of being sued, and it's just so strong that it's not accessible. It's something that you talk about in the movie as well, right? I think.
Yes, we do talk about that, and it's actually interesting that you bring that up. And I'm so sorry that happened. The Texas had a similar thing happen, especially McAllen, with Rosie Jimenez that we talk about in the film.
Yes.
She was someone who, this was in the 70s, but she basically got a midwife to do her abortion because she couldn't afford an abortion, right? And so in Texas and some other states too as well, but specifically in Texas, there's something called the Hyde Amendment, which really prohibits, it basically doesn't allow for government funding to go towards abortion. So like health insurance doesn't cover it. So that's what Leah was talking about. Like in California, we do have that available, but in Texas, they don't. So that was a huge barrier to access to her. And she ended up actually passing away and dying from this. So, every year in McAllen, and I think they do it also around the Rio Grande Valley where McAllen is on the border, they celebrate her. Basically, they, talk about how, abortion is still, like, access to abortion is still very restricted, and it's so important to honor her and her name. And I believe that was happening in Poland as well, that there were protests happening around this woman. So very, very similar parallels.
Yeah. But I think Rosie's situation is a very good proof that all the, talk about values and life and religion, all the big ideas, I mean, it's maybe one side of the coin, although I think it's a very demagogical, is the word, discourse, but it's actually like socially and financially based discrimination. Would you say, after having done the movie, something that you observed as well?
Yeah. No, I mean, sorry, you nailed it. I mean, it's absolutely, like, as we mentioned before, all of these laws that make access harder for people, it disproportionately impacts people of color the most, and people who don't have money to because rich people will always be able to get an abortion because they could travel to a different state, they could fly, they can travel to a different place, and it's so that's why it definitely disproportionately affects poor people of color the most. And what I think we wanted to elevate, and like the work of the organizers in these conversations, because I think sometimes a lot of the discussions leave that out, and it's like a very large piece of like that we need to remember this. And yeah, Maya, I'm not sure if you want to add.
No, I think you covered it.
So I definitely want to talk about your characters, because this is such an interesting bunch, and I think also very, in a way, representative of the tensions or social tensions we see around the subject. But before we do, I just want to ask you about the language. Is something that we somehow touched upon already. I remember watching several documentaries about the situation in Argentina, and I think the final liberalization, does this word even exist? I'm not sure, you know what I mean, of the abortion law. So the abortion finally became available, legal, and free of charge, as the protesters fought for many years. It had to do a lot with changing our sort of linguistic habits, to turn this language that tells you it's a baby, it's a mother, and all these things that are somehow, making us feel guilty about it. So how much do you think the language plays a role here?
Yeah, that's a great point. Language plays a huge role, as well as, at least in the States, as well as, politicians kind of weaponizing that language, right? So we see that happen as well, where they often refer to the fetus, as a child.
Unborn babies.
Unborn babies.
Isn't it like a unborn baby? Does it exist? I'm not sure. I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's very subjective, but they use that, as fact, right? As quote unquote fact. But something that we really wanted to highlight with this film, and what we even learned while making it, was just this idea around choice, right? How it really comes down to choice, and how we want to emphasize that. And that's why it was so important to us to have, the three people that we were filming really lead the story, rather than like what we call in the documentary world talking heads, which are kind of like, the traditional documentary that you see, where you just see people sitting down and doing an interview. We really wanted to show how does restrictive access to choice and abortion access really affect their lives, right? And a question we really explored in the film was, what does choice mean when you don't have many options? Which we feel like that is really shows in the film with each of our characters, right? And if you watch the film, I don't want to give too much away, but it really does come down to that, right? Personal choice. And I think we've really, obviously the issue around abortion has become political, but it's also personal, and it should be medical as well, right?
Yeah, first and foremost, right?
Exactly. And I think that people have lost sight of that, and just lost sight of, what does it mean to just have your own personal decision? What does it mean to, maybe want to fight for a person's right to choose, but not want to have an abortion yourself, and that's
Exactly.
fine, or
Yeah.
vice versa, and that's why we decided to even follow the people that we did, because as you can see, Denise is someone who's really interesting in that way. She's the clinic escort, so she's helping patients walk in safely in and out of the clinic. Something that she brings up is like, she couldn't have the courage to have an abortion, but she wants to fight for people's right to choose, right? And I just found that so incredible and so moving, because I had never heard of someone calling it a courageous act, which, like, yes, it should be considered that in many ways. And also hadn't really seen someone represented that way, that kind of represents this gray area, which, what does it mean to want to fight for someone's right to choose and someone's right to access, but wouldn't want to have that choice to yourself, themselves. So yeah, so again, language is so important, and something Leah had mentioned this before, but we really like to look to reproductive justice organizers in the Rio Grande Valley and in Texas in general to see, like, what are like language, what types of languages are they using around this? Because I think that they often bring up too that people are so afraid to use the word abortion, right? That it's like, they're like, oh, don't say abortion in the media, right? When it's like, that further stigmatizes it. So we really look to them to talk about language, because they're really leading this. So we want to look to them and what they're saying.
Leah, you want to add anything at this point?
I mean, again, Maya said it really well, and I guess I would just add that, like, we in so many ways attempted to, like, take out this, like, type of polarizing binary language that's assigned to this issue a lot, like between pro-life versus pro-choice, and we really wanted it to be about people's lives and stories, and, like, that to be the focus. And I think in so many ways to see it outside of what you traditionally see the debate in like these binaries, and that was definitely a goal with us in thinking about language, and even like the way that we filmed this the story.
Yeah, I think something that filmmakers maybe do not do, at least not on screen, but we do, like the people in everyday life, is just sometimes we judge by the first impression. We just sort of subconsciously judge people and put them into boxes because, I mean, it's just easier, I think, or it helps us, I don't know, cope with how complex the reality is. And it would be easy to, seeing these characters for the first time and getting this little info that we get at the beginning, just immediately know who they are, but they're not who we think they are at the beginning. And the evolution, or should I say the process, the exploration of characters is just so interesting, because it shows all the ambiguities I think we tend to forget about when we discuss very heated subjects like that. So when you were following the characters and sort of witnessing, all those shifts, I assume sometimes unexpected, how would you say this experience has been for you, following, their footsteps without knowing sort of where you're going with it?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the nature of a documentary, of course, but at a certain point, I think Maya and I really were led by like curiosity, and that there was a lot, that often you think that like filmmakers know everything and they're going to do a film about something they know everything about. That's actually not quite the process. And so it's like an intentional like learning experience that's like, of course, collaborative, with making sure that you are working with community members instead of telling a narrative and like putting that narrative on the community. And so in the beginning, Maya and I were like led with the question to everyone, which was, what are stories that are not being told? or being left out. And so every step of the way with the people that we chose to follow, right, Mercedes and Denise, that it was sort of like this kind of experience of, you know, what are some of the stories that you feel like have been ignored that you want to share, or you know, what are some of the complications that people should understand, and what are the nuances here. And so I think when things took unexpected turns, and when you know, over time, people, I think it's a beautiful thing to see that people can adapt and change their perspective given new information. And I think that's a beautiful lesson that I think anyone can take away, that, you know, it can really depend on getting, you know, being in a certain situation and then finding out that you do have resources and you do have support, or it might not be in the places you thought it was. But I think this just like opening and expanding is something that we were really open to with like filming, because we weren't putting any narrative onto the people we're filming. Like, we really let them tell their stories. So we went with the flow to an extent, and we weren't trying to pressure a narrative. So that's something that was very intentional.
Maya?
Remind me, are people going to have watched the film when they see this? Because
I would assume we can talk about what's in the film as well.
Yeah.
I mean, the Q&As are available, but I would say usually people watch them after watching movies. I don't think we really follow like spoiler, you know, philosophy here. It's more interesting to talk about what's in the movie. You know?
Great. I just wanted to make sure I thought that.
I think you can.
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest thing for us that was, you know, we never could imagine would happen, which was Leah
with Mercedes.
Mercedes.
Yes.
You know, people see that and they're like, is that scripted? We're like, no, that happened in real time.
That's so cool.
And you know, I can tell the story that basically Mercedes had called us. We happened to be in Texas filming, and she called us and she said, like, you know, I really want to get birth control. Like, can you come with me? Because at that point we were in many ways like a support system to her as well. So she had us go with her to this free clinic that you see in the film.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really there that where she got the resources, like, you know, she shows you Plan B, birth control. I think she got condoms that you see in the film, all these different reproductive health resources. And that was really a moment for her that clicked, like you see, you know. And I think it was so important for us to show that type of story and that transformation happening, because you see it happening from a real person who has to deal with day to day, right? Rather than.
Yeah, I just want to say sorry, but it's just such an intense moment. You know what I thought when I saw that moment? I thought, so she's been protesting outside this clinic for all this time, and she has no idea what's happening inside. Mm-hmm. She doesn't know. I mean, it was her first time inside, and then what? You know, she went to meet the enemy, and it turned out to be a good experience. I mean, it's a very, very powerful moment in the film to me.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, for her, and just to clarify, that free clinic was separate than the actual abortion clinic, Women's Health, but you know, it's similar in a way, because she's still getting these resources, right, that she never knew that she could get. And you're so right, she didn't know what was going on inside in the abortion clinic or in free clinics like this, right? In many ways, these kind of types of clinics that she ended up going into, these free clinics, they see those as an enemy too, right?
Yeah, it's a part of a system, devil's system.
Right. And I think that she was able, I think that was what was so interesting, is that she was able to make that connection that way, right? Where she was able to see, like, wait, so I'm getting all these resources here. If abortion is also defunded, you know, what happens to these resources that are so helpful to me, right? Exactly. We're like, yes, they also are going to strip away. That's the next thing, right? So, yeah, so we felt like that was such an incredible moment, and we never could have imagined that would have happened. And that in many ways, you know, in the documentary world, like the edit is really where the story gets shaped, right? Like we can film all these things, think that we're, like, okay, we're gonna get this, and at least we'll follow these three people's lives and see what happens. But it was really after that moment that I think, like, okay, it's very clear, the story that we want to share, and that was such an important moment in the edit that we wanted to emphasize.
So one more thing I want to ask you about very much, but I also want to say that I am aware that my perspective might be tainted because I'm not religious. I think we all have a right to decide about what we do with our bodies. So obviously, to me, a concept of, protesting in front of a clinic and putting this sort of sick pressure over people who are already in such a difficult position, I think is just pure cruelty and violence, actually. I think it should be illegal. Not only if you're trespassing, but in general, that should be illegal because that is just unacceptable. But watching this film, I was thinking about, because I know people who are religious and I know faith is a beautiful thing to them. I believe it can be a beautiful, very supportive thing. But here we sort of see this, well, I would say even maybe vicious face of religion, how it's sort of manipulating people into a sense of shame and guilt and presenting itself as the only solution, which is false in a way. I mean, it's not true. Creating this sort of image that you are beautiful, like they told Mercedes, right? You are beautiful to us, but, and then fine print, right? Only if you do this, 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 and this, and if you don't, well. Do you think this is like a powerful player in a way? I mean, these days, I would assume that's another factor is where you were shooting your film, maybe. But also, I think these days people are lonely and desperate, and the world is upside down. And it would be great if faith could be, aiding them, not terrorizing them. I mean, something I've been thinking about when watching the film as well. Not really a question, but maybe you want to answer to that somehow.
Yeah. I mean, religion definitely has a presence in this film, and what I think we definitely wanted to demonstrate, and I think is clear with like even Ray and all three of the people that we follow, is that they are people of faith, and they do find solace in religion, and they have to carve out like their own kind of space within religion, and it is meaningful to them. And I think that kind of goes to show that like they don't have to be mutually exclusive. Like, you can be very religious and want to have a right to choose, or you can be religious, not want an abortion yourself, but have a right to choose. Yeah. Or you might be like very anti-choice and not religious. So I think we just wanted to share that, it's not necessarily like correlating, but I think there is this definitely there's like a presence of how something that is can be such a solace be turned and manipulated for political agendas, and that's I think can be clear in some of the interactions in the film, and again, like it's more politically motivated than it is like religiously motivated in certain situations. So we definitely, and we're working with like wonderful organizations that are religious and pro-choice and like Catholics for Choice. And I think it's important for people who see this film who may see themselves in these stories and are in this gray area of being religious but not knowing quite what to think, that maybe they can find community still. So I think that was also important for us, is like make people feel seen, and that there are communities for them, and that it isn't black or white, and there isn't these binaries, that they can have this choice. So that is something we're excited about with like the impact, is that we're working with like a lot of religious individuals. And in the end of the film, in the credits, you see a whole religious coalition of different faiths come together to bless the clinic. So I think that just goes to show, like, it's not necessarily religion. It's and for many people, especially in this region, religion is a huge part of their culture and life. Exactly. So it's So that's Maya, if you want to say.
Yeah, I think I would just add that something that was important for us to show is that, this is a border community, and it's a primarily Latinx community. And in many ways, in family units, religion is like a really important part of the family, right? And there's a lot of gray area around it too, right? So we wanted to really be able to create a film that also brought different people to the table, which I think Leah had mentioned earlier. What would it mean to bring like your religious grandmother to this? And if the viewer happens to be more pro-choice or doesn't know quite where they stand, like to bring these two to the table and have a conversation around this, right? And see someone like Mercedes who's able to transform her views in real time, right? What does it mean to have a conversation? And so we wanted to also highlight, how religion in many ways is prevalent in this community, but also to Leah's point, like how religion has been used as like a weapon by politicians and by specific people, because Yolanda is the woman in the film that basically becomes the godmother to Mercedes' kids, and she's the woman you're referring to who calls her beautiful when she's coming in, and is in many ways is manipulative, right?
She infuriated me. This character made me so angry. I think she hurt Mercedes so badly, I mean, maybe somewhere deep in her heart she believes that she's helping, but I mean, I bet if she went to a psychotherapist they would tell her otherwise. So I think I sort of want to ask you the last question. It's something we've already talked about a little bit, but it's in the end of the film. So, I mean, there is this thing called Rosie's Law, right? It's been discussed, submitted this year, I believe. So after you wrapped, can you tell me what's the situation and what are the perspectives, or is it already implemented?
Yeah, so Rosie's Law, for people who don't know, we explained a little bit at the end of the film, but basically it's trying to fight against the Hyde Amendment and would allow for government funding to go towards abortions within state Medicare, I believe. So right now, I believe it's still an ongoing fight, and it turned into I believe it's called the Texas Each Law, Leah. If I might be wrong, so please don't quote me on that. But
yeah,
they're also
Googling right now.
Yeah,
I can see that.
Yeah, so they're trying to. Rosie's Law would be specific to like Texas and specifically like the Rio Grande Valley, but then they're also trying to make this a law that would also go throughout the state and then in different states as well.
Sorry.
Yeah, was I right that it's the Each Law? I might be wrong that it was the Each Law, but I don't know if you look it up if you want to, but yes, Rosie's Law is they're still fighting it right now.
Mm-hmm. So before we wrap, just tell me whether all the plans that were sort of listed for the characters in the end, do you know anything whether they are on the path to succeeding and how they're doing now?
Yeah, we can. So yeah, everyone is doing well. Denise is, I believe, doing like clinicals and she's very close to finishing nursing school. So she's been doing well, and Ray is also living with his sister still, doing well, and Mercedes is also on the road to recovery and very much so wants to be part of our impact discussions, and so she's also happy to report doing very well. So yeah, everyone is definitely in a good place, and I think it's still a very challenging situation, like politically in Texas right now, of course. So there's a lot of course, many challenges, and the group that Denise is part of, South Texans for Reproductive Rights, is actually Injustice, is kind of shifting their focus to providing like Plan B and other services outside of volunteer escorting at the clinic. Mm-hmm. So they're definitely evolving to the needs of their community and doing some really great work right now. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. One thing I just wanted to add is that I think your film, I mean, I hope I already knew that, but I hope if anybody had doubts, it would help them or realize that sometimes we are deeply, deeply convinced we know something, and then life comes and bites you in the ass, and it turns out you knew nothing. You know. So I think that's one safe thing to say definitely after watching on The Divide. So being radical and very close-minded in this radicalism, I think, is never an optimal solution, I would say. So let me just remind our viewers that those two people that you see with us are creators on The Divide, Leah Galant, as I've already pronounced you in Polish, and Maya Cueva. Thank you so much, guys, for being with us, and thank you for this film, which is super timely, sadly, in Poland.
Yeah. Thank you for this great conversation, and everyone for watching it. And yeah, again, very have a lot of gratitude for being able to screen this film right now in Poland.
Thank you so much for having us.